Welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. Scott and I are here in the studio. We got some disturbing news this week, with the newest state media release. So we'll go ahead and Scott read that off.
Yeah, so if you haven't already heard this, which I'm sure most of you listening that take the time to listen to our show and are as invested as much as we are in high school athletics, I'm sure you've already heard this, but posted December 1st, 2020 from the CIF state media release. Due to the continued surge in COVID-19 infections, the California Department of Public Health has postponed the issuance of its updated youth sports guidance. The California Interscholastic Federation does not expect the CDPH will issue any guidance allowing for schools to return to full practice and competition until after January 1st, 2021 at the earliest. Thus, all full practice and competition start dates are officially on hold until updated guidance is issued. Therefore, to provide the 10 CIF sections, our 1,605 member schools and more than 800,000 student athletes the best opportunity to compete in Season 1 sports once allowed by the CDPH and local county offices of public health, the CIF state office is removing all regional and state championship events from the Season 1 sports calendar. By canceling regional and state championship events, more student athletes will have the opportunity to participate in a longer season rather than a truncated season with regional and state postseason play for a limited number of schools. Additionally, boys volleyball will be moved to Season 2 to avoid the loss of a second full season, and an updated Season 2 calendar to include boys volleyball will be posted in January. The CIF is confident this decision is a necessary and reasonable action for our member schools, student athletes, and school communities in light of the current statewide crisis. This revision to the CIF State 2021 Season 1 sports calendar offers our sections and leagues the flexibility and needed time to plan for the return to practice and competition once updated guidance is provided by the CDPH.
So what does that mean? So basically, Season 1 is football, volleyball, all of our winter sports. So football, volleyball, cross country. I think they moved a couple. I think they moved one of the lower division soccer's into Season 1. So what do we know? And then Season 2 is all the other sports. So basically, they've taken the winter sports and made one season, and all the other sports from fall and spring an additional season. So now what do we know? So they've canceled regional playoff games, which means no NorCal championships for football or volleyball. They don't have those in some of the other sports anyway. Basketball does, but as of now, Season 1's not in. Basketball's not in Season 1. So no regional and no state competitions, which everybody probably knew that was coming, because you add a state championship adds a month plus to a regular football season.
Right. And I kind of gotta back away a little bit and kind of revisit. It's no secret the attitude on this as a podcast, how we feel about this whole situation. There's no question that we obviously don't agree with everything that's been done. I understand there's some necessary measures that have to take place, and I don't think that can be argued. But why are we not, and try not to beat a dead horse, but why are we not looking at the models that are being used in other states where they're having success? They're having events, and they're not, the spread is being extremely limited, and they're doing a great job in other states of putting these events on and regulating the way that they're held, regulating the interaction with the students and the coaches and the players, and really doing a great job of monitoring that. And it really, I read something yesterday, and I don't remember who it was, but it was a high school athlete that was begging for the chance to play and said that they would play no matter what the regulations were. And they were begging to play with no fans, begging to play without their parents able to watch the games and all that. They're really kind of at their wits' end, and it's heartbreaking to see this.
Yeah, and I think when we originally had our I think our very first podcast when we started talking about some of the, I guess, disagreements that we had with the current policies that were being enforced in California, we really had some concerns about things starting in December. And there are two sides. Was talking to a friend of mine today, and we talked about how most issues in the United States, or even California, or even in your general area, there's people who strongly believe one way, and there's people who strongly believe the other way, but somewhere in the middle is the majority. And now we're in this environment, whether it be political or what have you, that's very much divided, and so you have very strong feelings by people on both sides. I'm to the point where I don't necessarily disagree with suspending things at this point. I don't think we're going to be able to fight that uphill battle, and not that I think that this segment of the population is so much subjected to these types of to the virus and the things that go along with the virus. I'm not saying that. I just think that where we're at in society, I think it's such a divisive issue that I think trying to get something started at this point is difficult. My problem with it is because we kicked the can, and we kicked the can knowing that this was going to happen. So the powers that be chose to start on December 7th, knowing that the flu surge and cold season and all the other things that we deal with in the winter, the numbers are always exacerbated.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with that. We're not arguing the fact that this is a terrible disease that is contracted by, we're now finding out that it's affecting people differently depending on their risk factor, and now they're finding out that that risk profile is constantly changing because of the statistics are telling us that whether it's an age dynamic, whether it's a pre-existing condition dynamic, whatever, that there's definitely some of that going on. But again, I go back to my original point, is we also have models that are being used in other parts of the country that are allowing for the student athlete to still participate. And beyond that, our show is about athletics, but the same argument could be had for, all different facets that are allowed for high school age kids. Drama, choir. For sure. Drama, band, these kids are also getting deprived of the ability to do those things as well. And those are essential aspects of growing up, I think. I mean, we're eliminating this, and I'm sure at some point down the road we're going to have some statistics on how this has dramatically affected the mental health of students from the age of 5 all the way through the age of 18 and beyond. But I'm sure that's going to be an effect of it. And I'm from the last podcast, I'm sure people, and I've had a couple of responses about my kind of I don't want to say well, I don't want to say disdain, but my dislike of the way that the CIF is being run. And there's some valid points. It is my opinion and mine only, because I have had some past experiences with the CIF directly, and I can't say that I agree with a lot of the things that they do. I do realize that their hands are tied here in terms of what they can do, because they are kind of being directed by the state. But don't say things in your statement like the CIF is giving the sections and leagues the flexibility. There's no flexibility here. So strike that from your statement, number one, because there's no flexibility there. And call it what it is. It's a hardcore restriction on high school athletics.
Yeah. And you're seeing things that are, these organic types of protests and people starting to push back and wanting some answers. And really where we're at, I think, with this whole thing now is what's the plan? I mean, what's the path? I mean, we know, here's where we had the issue in the beginning, is that there was one plan, and there was never really a plan that was shared with anybody. It was somebody had a plan apparently, but it was, hey, we're going to start on December 7th and we're going to be good to go. Well, that never happened. And now what's the next plan? And the problem with that is you have to have a plan after that as well, because we don't know. We do know that vaccines are coming, and people are believing that that's going to slow this, the numbers and, things like that. But I think where we land on this is, you have kids that in a regular time in life, just say pre-COVID, that mental health was an issue for teenagers in general. Your body's changing, your hormones your body's raging with hormones, your mindset changes. And the thing is that most kids have outlets, during those times. Pre-COVID, we had, like we already talked about, we had band and we had choir and we had drama and we had all kinds of different clubs on campus. And, and then you add athletics, and then you have exterior, things that kids get jobs and things like that. And all of those things are removed from a kid that's now forced to sit in front of a computer, for the majority of their day, not being able to smile at anybody or hug anybody or be cared for, and I coach football, and it's, football is a sport that's, for years and years and years, you're supposed to be the toughest, meanest, baddest SOB around. Every day I leave practice, I tell my kids I love them. I appreciate them being out there, and I think that it's important for all of us to be around each other. They give me as much, as much happiness in my life as hopefully that we and football bring them. And so what's the next plan? I mean, what are our options? I've talked to multiple ADs and multiple coaches and, just the general population. What are we going to do? Like, where are we going to go? Like, what's next? And, so now we've kicked the can to January 1st. If anybody believes in the next 3 or 4 weeks that the numbers are going to be any different than they are today, I think that I have a bridge to sell you. I mean, our numbers are always elevated for the unhealthy right now.
Yeah. And, kind of what you were talking about, the interaction of the coach and the athlete. I would, being an ex-coach myself, I share your sentiment completely. Coaches at the high school level, for the most part, I mean, you go to Texas and there are full-time football coaches that are making a heck of a lot more money than I am. But for the most part, coaches coach for the love of the sport, for the love of the athlete. They love developing, assisting in the development athletically and physically and mentally and all of these things. The salaries just aren't there to dictate that. So now we're, is there going to be a negative byproduct of what's going on now because we're going to lose coaches as well? I mean, are we going to lose, obviously we're going to lose athletes and, to me, the other day I was watching, got the chance to watch the Oregon State game and the football game. And I don't know how many people got to watch that, but man, what a great football game that was. Yeah. I know you being an Oregon fan, you probably weren't happy with the outcome, but as a football fan, I think you can agree it was a great football game. And it really, if you listen to the discussions that they had after that, as much as it sounds bizarre to say that there was an impact, obviously not having fans in the stands because of COVID and all that. But beyond that, if people recall, the Pac-12 initially said we're not going to have a football season because of, because everything's going on. And we had the Big Ten, the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, the other four members of the Power 5 conference said, we're pressing on. Yeah. We're going to have this anyway. And we're going to work within the confines of the restrictions that we have. And we're seeing games get canceled or postponed. Ohio State's in question right now if they're even going to be in the playoff because they may not meet the minimum games. But the point that I'm going with the Pac-12 is, they have kind of shot themselves in the foot now because, they've been working very diligently as a group, all the coaches, to try to get the Pac-12 back to the prominence that it once was, and be in the conversation of being one of the top teams in that Power Five. But essentially, they're going to have a very difficult time for years to come to get back there. Oregon was ranked 15th when they played Oregon State. For Oregon State, this is a huge win, and kudos to them. It's a great win. But by Oregon State winning that football game, have really kind of compounded the problem of the whole conference now, because their best chance of getting the playoff was Oregon. That's out now.
And I saw the same statistics from that. And USC is the only team that really has a shot now at this point to get into the playoff conversation, and I believe it's a 1.6% chance. So is that a chance?
No. And so now what's going to happen, I'm wondering if and I know we've talked about this before, but if we used to call them blue chippers, but I think they're called, 4-star, 5-star, 3-star athletes now. If I'm a 5-star athlete and I have offers from schools in, let's say I have one offer from every Power 5 conference. Well, I'm going to rank my offers like the conferences are going to be ranked, because now in fifth place is going to be the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take a serious look at the ACC and the Big Ten and the SEC, you know, and so unfortunately that's going to be true, but hopefully there's enough talent out there that, the Pac-12 can still get their athletes and play it up. And that's important to me, because we live in the Pac-12 and I like to see quality football.
Well, we want to be relevant. I mean, everybody wants to be relevant, and the landscape is the landscape, and that's where. And I think it's relevant because for us, I mean, with even our kids. So say we're talking to 800,000 kids in California, and 10 of those kids go to a Power 5 school. Say, it's still 10 kids that are representing us.
Yeah,
the 10 kids that are just in Stockton alone, we have 4 or 5 kids that have Pac-12 or Pac-10 offers.
Yeah,
or Pac-12 offers. And it's like. That's phenomenal. I mean, we're little 209 is pumping out athletes like there's nobody's business.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we're in a position now where we have to really, where do we go? Like, what are we gonna do now? And we've talked about this a little bit in the past. I've seen in the last week 7 or I think it's 8 different club teams rising up. And I'm not talking 7-on-7 club teams. I'm talking full contact travel football.
Yeah, and this is going to, we've talked about in the past how club sports have impacted high school sports. Most notably, softball and baseball, basketball. I think you can almost attribute an effect to all high school sports except for football. But now that's going to change, and maybe that's a good thing, because the regulation's going to be a little bit different. I think we've empowered, again, this is no surprise to people that have heard me in the past. I think we've empowered the CIF way too much. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be regulation during COVID. There absolutely, most definitely should be. But if other states have developed these models, we should be able to do the same. And good for these associations to pop up and provide opportunities for kids that want to take it. And if you as a family feel that it's too much of a risk, then that's fine. Don't be part of it. But there's for those that do want to participate in football, good for these associations for popping up. I think it's great. And just one last thing I want to add in the Pac-12 conversation. I hope that no one takes that as I think the Pac-12 is garbage. I'm a huge fan of the Pac-12. I would love nothing more than the Pac-12 to be the power conference. And I'm a huge Cal fan. I'd like to see Cal be better than there. So if you have an offer from Cal, take it. We want to see Cal get better.
Go to Cal.
Although the Cal-Stanford game was terrible.
Go see Cal. So part of what we have, some of the things that are going to have to happen at this point are and if that were to happen, so say travel does take over, the football landscape. I think we see the evolution of the IMG Academy type model.
Yeah.
That's coupled with all sports. So, and I feel like at one point Excel tried that. That was going to be the dynamic, is it was going to be a sports oriented. I don't think that they had the facilities to accommodate all the sports to do that.
Well,
until they built that phenomenal gym.
Yeah, and I can tell you they were headed in the right direction, but that was a situation where there was some political involvement that, for one reason or another, without going into detail, I have a pretty good background on what happened there, and it's unfortunate what happened, because I thought they were heading in the right direction. It was just, anytime you have elected officials involved, it can kind of muddy the waters, and we'll leave it at that.
And we've seen it in California. We see more of the parochial leagues. I mean, where you have the private schools that, the De La Salles and the St. John's Bosco and St. Mary's and Jesuit and
exactly. And here's what I'd like to see. I mean, I think it would be fantastic if all those schools, those parochial schools, rose up and said, screw the rest of you guys. We're gonna formulate our own league, and we're gonna have our own governing body. Whether maybe it's the Diocese of California that says, okay, we're the governing body, and we're gonna set forth the rules, and here they are, and here's the league, and maybe have a Northern California and a Southern California division. They play, each champion plays each other for a state championship.
I could honestly see it happening. I honestly could see an independent organization rise up through this, because now, what typically people are accustomed to things being a certain type of way, and when they're that way, it's hard to deviate from that. And now we're going to spend the better part of 15, 16 months, if we're able to play again. We're going to spend the better part of 15 or 16 months, maybe even longer, without any high school sports. If there's ever been an opportunity to create something different, it's now. I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, and you may have some public schools, because I would see that more like an open format, like we have in basketball. You have the open division where, a D3 school at one year that has a great year can choose to play with the big boys and just get after it and see if they're really truly the state champion.
Sure.
So I could see an independent model for sure where, and I, it opens up, if you're independent, it opens up more teams to come from out of state and play, or you to go out of state and play. And really you can start matching yourself up, because you have the, and those aren't aware, the IMG Academy isn't affiliated with it's not a religious affiliation. It's just it's
a private organization.
It's a private organization.
It's actually a for-profit organization, I think.
And I believe they're more along the lines of like a college prep type of a program.
That's exactly what they are. They've modeled themselves after organizations in other countries that do the exact same thing. Because, as you know, Europe doesn't have high school athletics; they're all club sports. But you've seen in Russia, you've seen in I hate to name off communist countries, but Russia and China, where they have put these academies together specifically for certain sports. And that's why you see some really tremendous basketball players coming out of China now, or coming out of these other countries, because they've had those organizations.
Well, and the United States, we've always put a priority on athletics, and so we've always been competitive. I mean, probably the melting pot doesn't hurt us, to have people from a bunch of different backgrounds. So that probably helps us in the majority of ways.
Yeah. Hey, as we're sitting here talking about opportunities for the student athlete and thinking outside the box and doing things differently, I've got a question, and maybe you've seen this more than I have because you're more in the know. But I know for a fact, and where I've seen it the most is in the state of Minnesota, where these families are taking their student athletes at the junior high, or maybe the grammar school level, and they're holding their students back to gain that extra year of growth, so that when they do hit high school, they are a little bit more advanced. And I can tell you, I've seen athletes entering college on the female side, because of that, they're 20 years old almost when they're going to college. The male hockey players, for example, in all parts of the country, it's a little bit different, because of they get what's called get a couple of years to play juniors and whatnot. So that's a little bit different. But do you think that we're going to see more of that across the board because they have lost this year. So like if, for example, let's say I am the father of a 6th grade basketball player and I'm looking forward going, well, gosh, he's going to be in the 7th grade or she's going to be in the 7th grade. And I, can I gain another year because of this? Or does the CIF allow that to happen once you get in high school? Maybe enlighten me on that a little bit because I don't know all those rules.
Yeah. So, and I don't share everything with Scott that I post sometimes, and he doesn't share everything with me. But on Twitter, I posted a poll last night. And it's reclassification is basically what it is, and basically you're saying, hey, I'm supposed to, for all intents and purposes, I was supposed to graduate in 2022. And historically or typically, you're not allowed within the high school times. If you're passing classes, you can't reclassify to a later graduation date for athletically motivated reasons. With that being said, prior to a child entering high school, they do and if you have an athlete that you feel would benefit from a little bit more schooling, B, a little bit more growing, give them another year of growth, C, a little bit more preparation, if those 3 things kind of add up, and I have an 8th grade, and here's what I would tell you. If I had an 8th grader today, that's about to start school, or even a 7th grader that's broaching high school, mm-hmm. I would definitely hold them back. And the reason being is if I think my kid's going to play a sport in college, every single college in the United States for the next 5 to 7 years is going to be inundated with a roster size that they weren't prepared for. The CIF or the NCAA, we stick with the CIF so much. The NCAA granted everybody from spring sports last year and winter sports last year another year of eligibility. Now, all the football players from this year, even though the ones that are participating, are also granted a year of eligibility. This is a pass for them. This year does not count eligibility-wise. So you take a roster of 100, and that roster of 100 was supposed to be reduced by 25 with the graduating class. Those 25 now stay. You bring in your 25 freshmen, so now your roster of 100 is now 125. And the thing is it's just the seniors weren't the only ones granted an extra year of eligibility. It was the freshman to the senior. So you have the 25 kids in each class are now pushed back a year. And so recruiting classes are typically 2 years ahead of their, so you're recruiting right. The 11th grade year is really when softball changed a few years back where they were recruiting in 8th grade. And offers, people are going, I got an offer in 8th grade. You got a verbal offer in 8th grade. It's not, a verbal offer is exactly what it is. It's a verbal offer, and both sides, nobody's making a commitment to anybody at that point.
Right. And that's worth the whole recruiting thing as it has been affected by COVID, I think is worth an entirely additional conversation, and maybe that's a topic for another show.
Well, you and I had this conversation offline.
All the time.
Yeah. And the other part of it is even outside of athletics, our kids have sat out of school for what will be close to 20 months.
Well, here's the other thing too. We're talking athletics, but I think there's got to be a certain amount of consideration. And don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those beating up the teachers like a lot of people are. And they're dealing with the hand that they've been given as well. Having to teach online, I imagine, is probably not an easy task for them. So thank you for to the teachers for what they're doing to help these students. But I think the teachers would even agree that there's a disconnect there because of the way that information is delivered. A live setting is much more effective than an online setting. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. With that being said, if I have a student athlete that is struggling in the classroom because of that, would it be a good idea for maybe to hold them back? Because if they're going, let's use the example, let's say they're and this is just completely random, there's no pre-thought into this, but let's say I'm in an Algebra 2 class and I pass with a D, and now I'm going to Algebra 3, if that's such a thing. And I don't know, academics have changed a lot since I've been in school. But let's say I'm going to, or pre-calculus maybe. Am I sufficiently prepared to take that class? You know, and again, this is not a dig on the teachers. The teachers are doing everything they can. And it's not a dig on the students sitting at home. I think there's a certain disconnect there because of, you know, the way that these classes are being set up. So to kind of, you know, go along with your conversation, I think that's a consideration that has to be made as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen it brought up online a lot about, you know, give the kids a reset year, give them everybody a reset year. A lot of things happen if you do that. I mean, and I'm not saying that initially when that came up, I was against it. Now, I don't necessarily know that I'm against it. I think that, you know, our education system took a long time to develop. You know, I mean, you went from, you know, a lot of different things and you developed a curriculum and the way things were done, and none of them ever said to do something online. Nothing was ever, because, you know, as a teacher and even as a coach, we see it. I can communicate to a player from a distance and can't see that player's eyes, and I let him tell him something, and I can't tell if he got it or not. Like, can't tell if it registered. If I'm face to face with that kid and I'm looking him in the eyes and I'm having a conversation with him, if I'm attentive at all, I can see where I lost him. I can see when the blank stare comes. And as a teacher, and this is where I feel for the teachers, is that I do feel like the teachers get way too much blame. And not necessarily that they should get more credit, but I think that a person that's dedicating their lives to the betterment of children for a nominal wage, because it's not like nobody became a teacher to become rich.
Right. That's for sure.
So I think anybody who's willing to do that and put up with the things that they have to put up with, because I see what I have to put up with. So I'm sure it's the same way in the education process. So for a teacher it hurts a teacher when their student fails, and it hurts when a student doesn't fulfill their potential. So when you're doing something online and the kid is somewhat engaged, you know, I've heard at Stockton Unified, they don't have to turn their cameras on. So you don't even know if the kid's even there. Maybe he logged in and walked away and you don't even know if he's there or not, or she. I mean,
yeah.
But the point is that how do we prepare? So we're going to take a kid that was a sophomore when this happened. So say a kid was a sophomore, you know, at last March, and now they've missed the end of their sophomore year. They've missed they're going to miss the majority of their junior year. And now they're going to have to start applying to colleges prior to their senior year, and then have a senior year. You know, their grades are going to be sufficient, hopefully, because, you know, I think the grading systems in most schools have taken a step back and not been as rigid. But because our grading systems aren't as rigid, are our kids just as prepared? You know, are you going to send a kid away to college with 1 year of basic education in the last 2.5 years that maybe they're prepared, but maybe they're not? And so are we going to see more kids fail as seniors? Are we going to see more kids start college and fail as freshmen, you know, because they just don't have the foundation, you know, that's going to prepare, you know, we've seen this. You see it when you coach a sport. You know, you and I both coach football. Well, you and I both coach football. You coach wrestling, I coach baseball. I've seen kids that in season will have a 2.5 to a 3.0. As soon as their season's over, it drops below a 2.0 because the carrot's no longer there. Yeah,
for sure. And I think the other part of the conversation too, that we discount as a society is the social aspect of attending school. You know, how, you know, it's going to be years before we really see the after effects of what has happened this past year. I think we're going to see some socially awkwardness from people down the road because they're not getting that now and they're playing catch up. Something that we talked about a few minutes ago in terms of, you know, them granting an additional year of eligibility. That's not the golden ring that everybody's going to find out that it is. That is the NCAA saying we'll recognize this. That's not the school saying they'll recognize it. And I'll tell you right now, the University of Wisconsin has already said that they're not going to honor that for last year's spring athletes. Those spring athletes lost their senior year or their junior year, or whatever. They're not getting it back.
Well, they keep the eligibility to lose the scholarship. So And they may not, maybe the team itself may not keep the player, but
Right.
but they would have the year of eligibility should they choose to go to another school.
But but the problem with that now is that if you, for lack of a better term, let's call them free agent athletes, you're going to have a flood of free agent athletes. This is the best way that I think to me, the best example of what's happening right now is to go back to, you remember the I Love Lucy show?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's an episode where her and was it Betty? Is that her? What was her best friend anyway? So they're working in a candy factory and they're sitting there and they're having to move the candy and they can't keep up with it. And all of a sudden they're trying to ram all this candy in their mouth because it's going out of control and it just doesn't stop. It keeps coming. That's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like the athletes are going to keep coming. If you grant an extra year, that's going to affect every single human being alive behind you coming up because they get an extra year. They get an extra year. The only way to make it work and function correctly is if you hit the reset button on one specific year and those people are going to get screwed. That year is going to get screwed out of a year of eligibility. And that's the only way I think they can make it work. And I hope it doesn't happen. Maybe there are other alternatives. I don't know what they are, as we're kind of drawn down here. If there's, again, take the poll that was posted on Twitter. I think that's going to really give some insight to what we're talking about. Post your comments, post concerns, post things you like, post things you don't like. We definitely want to hear back from everyone, and Chris has that information.
Yeah. And as we get, into this next phase, which we don't know what that phase is going to be, it's going to be paramount that all of us work together, and the divisiveness has to end. I mean, at some point we all have to kind of get in the same boat and try to row in the same direction. There's a lot of things that are going on mental health wise that, you should be sharing, checking in on your kids, checking in on your friends, your kids' friends, anybody that you think that might have, any reason to have an issue at this point. There's a lot of help out there and there's a lot of people out there willing to help people. We the person that needs the most help is usually the last one to ask for help, so we have to be a little bit more proactive how we do things with our kids these days. And even the kids that aren't, I'll be walking around and I just stop a kid for no reason and talk to him and check in on him. And so it's important, mental health wise, that we are looking, outside the box and we're thinking a lot differently than we ever have. If any kid that you walk by, just say hi, smile at him. I mean, you don't know how far that'll go with that kid that day. So
amen to that.
And then as we get into this, and this next month, I'm hoping that, that the CIF and the counties and the state are preparing a plan that will help us, to get back to some type of something. And not just a plan B. We're going to need a plan C, and we're going to need a plan D, and most likely a plan F. I mean, where we get down to this, I've talked to a couple of people, and we may have to go beyond June to play if we can get some sports in. But hopefully, the smartest people making these decisions will decide that all seasons are needed. It shouldn't be a pick and a choose. We were kicked in the face with COVID in the spring, and so we had to cancel a season. That doesn't mean that we should have to cancel a football season or a volleyball season or a basketball season because they didn't have to sit out a year. It's not a this or that. We need to figure out a way to make it all work. So like Scott said, we're very open to, to ideas. We would love for you guys to share some of your ideas. You can always reach us at Twitter at 209 Prep. We're on Facebook at 209 Prep Sports. And please email us at prepsports209@yahoo.com. We'll be Scott and I, as we come up with these different ideas about things, that we think might work, we'll definitely post polls and start to use Twitter a little bit more with sharing information and expanding on information. There was a march on the Capitol last Friday, and it's just I think it's difficult because I think it's hard in this day and age to advertise that and get people to participate. And I think that a lot of people are, they're afraid of catching COVID. They're afraid of, if they were out and seeing out, that they would catch slack for being out there supporting something, and then there's some people that are rigid and would go support it either way. But for us to get, some normalcy back and to advocate for our children, you know, all of us are going to need to work together, and all of us are going to need to figure out a way to make this happen. So, and I think that all of us can do it. I do think that there's an answer. You know, we've seen it happen. We should have never postponed fall sports. It should have never, ever happened, but it has. And so we can be pissed off about it and we can, you know, complain about it, but it's not going to change anything, you know? And so we have to figure out how we're going to move forward and how we're going to move forward together. So, you know, we're open to any ideas. If any of parents, coaches, kids, anybody want to come on, we would gladly have, you know, people probably get sick of hearing Scott and I talk about stuff, and, you know, a different idea or different perspective would always help us out. So,
yeah, for sure. Be nice to everyone. And like you said, you know, you never know, however bad you have it, somebody's got it worse. And so just, you know, let's all be nice to each other and respect each other, and we'll get through this.
Yes, sir. So everybody have a great week. We'll be back out on Thursday. So and we'll have hopefully some updates and some new information for everybody. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.